Have you heard the year 2027 coming up in UFO circles over the last few months? I have. I've noticed in various interviews that different people that I respect and that I give a lot of credit for generally getting things right have been mentioning, maybe not in 2027, but in the years ahead, that something strange and uncomfortable is going to occur around this phenomenon, that there is some kind of time constraint which is driving disclosure, and that time constraint might be associated with the arrival of a non-human intelligence. Now, shoot me down right now. I know this sounds like a sci-fi movie, but I'm not here to tell you that this is true. What I'm going to do is show you a series of clips that show that people that you and I would tend to respect in this field, people who have tended to get things right, or just people who are very senior and have inside sources, have all been talking about some kind of time constraint. The idea that disclosure is not just being driven by people who are passionate about getting the truth, but that it also might be driven by a sense of fear or perhaps a very precise understanding of a time frame that we just can't avoid. I'm going to show you those clips in just a moment, but just before I do, a couple of observations. Beyond the fact that many of these people are people that we would trust or people that we would say have generally got things right, I do want to throw a bit of shade on this notion of 2027. First thing to say is that even though these people may have a good reputation, they don't know that this is going to happen. I don't think any of them are claiming that something is going to happen very specifically. They're all claiming that they've got sources or people they've heard talking about time constraints, right? Or about contracts and agreements with non-human intelligences. So no one's saying that they know that this is the case. They're saying that they have anecdotal evidence, they've had people talking. Number two, in these circles, because we're all relying on what people say, a huge amount of our data and our understanding of this subject comes on what people say or what people write in documents. And as a consequence, you can end up getting rumors spreading from one person to another person to another person. Even though I'm about to share with you 7 or 8 different people who are talking in this way, it could well be that 3 or 4 of them have all been talking to the same source. Okay, and it could well be that some of them are actually relying on each other. We don't really know how entangled this spread of this rumor is. The final thing that I think is really important is that this idea that something is coming that we can't avoid, it really serves those who want to maintain UFO secrecy. It really serves those who may not like the active UFO disclosure movement that's occurring right now. Let me explain that. When we hear that something is coming, whether it's the release of a document or the release of a report or someone is going to say something or potentially someone is going to arrive, when we're told that this future event is coming, it turns active, passionate investigators into passive receptors. Think about what happened with Paul Benowitz and the whole Bill Moore thing back in the 80s with Richard Doty. Great example of disinformation being spread through the UFO community, absolutely. But also it's a great example of how you turn a brilliant researcher and you turn them into a passive receptor. So not only are you blocking the truth, but you're also dealing with the most capable people in the community. Would it be convenient for people who don't want UFO disclosure to spread the rumor that we don't even need to worry about UFO disclosure because non-human intelligence is going to arrive inevitably on a certain timescale? Now, I'm not saying that's what's going on, but I just want to raise the point that actually we can watch these videos like we will in just a second, and we can say, this is really interesting. But none of it should prevent us from continuing in what we're all trying to do, which is knocking on doors and applying pressure to get the truth out, whatever that might be, whether it's comfortable or uncomfortable, as I think these various witnesses would attest to. Without further ado, I'm going to roll these clips. My name's Jason Somoza, and this has been Jason Somoza's Ufology Moment. Enjoy, and let me know what you think it all means. Cheers.
It's interesting because going back to disclosure is a process, and all the work that you've done since 2017, you and your team. Am I wrong to have sensed a little bit of urgency in this as well?
There is a sense of urgency because, people said, well, why now? Well, because it's not on our time scale, not on our timeline. It's not up to us. They're here, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. They're here. The question is why? What's the purpose?
There's got to be a reason why the powers that be in Washington, D.C. are starting to say we need to actually say the words out loud, and we need to get language in right now to get this taken care of. And I'm concerned, Ross, that at the end of the day, the only thing that would make a politician do that and act in that sort of enhanced way where they're in a hurry is that there's some bad news involved in this.
Look, I've got a pretty clear idea of what the government knows. and I
Yes,
can
you do.
understand why they're moving to expedite. Yes, there is a constraint of time.
Right. Yeah. And I'll say this much. That year has come up in a classified setting in a skiff that I was in Washington, D.C. I was asked, John, what have you heard about 2027 and this phenomenon? They asked me what I thought about it, and I gave them my thoughts about it.
I'm not saying that this is real.
Right.
I'm not saying that this is a valid argument. All I'm saying is this is what I've been told by people, very intelligent people who believe this to be true. I don't know what to believe because I can't validate it.
But what's the timeline that these scientists have related to you?
I was told this was like last year. I was told between 5 and 7 years.
I don't think we're going to be in any shape in a decade to be doing very much of anything. So I'm not hopeful for the future direction that we're moving in it.
And the future direction, climate-wise, AI-wise?
Climate-wise and geopolitical-wise, the whole thing I think is going to kind of come. I think things are going to be pretty difficult starting in a few years. And from what I've been told by sources.
What does that mean? It's going to be difficult?
It's I can't say specifically. I don't know that much yet, and I can't really say, but just that a lot of what we take for granted now in life, I don't think is going to be, we're not going to have it. A lot of things we have now that makes our lives as wonderful as they are. I'm just concerned. That's all.
Yeah.
So I don't think 10 years in the future. I only think 3 or 4 years into the future.
Mm-hmm. It's too uncertain past that point?
I would say so. Yeah.
Phoned my nephew and said, give me the general's telephone number and give him a heads up that I'll be calling. Because I thought I should check with him personally and hear his voice and what he had to say. And I had met him, so I knew who it was. And so I phoned him, and before I could even say, hello, how are you, what's the weather like, he said, every word is true and more. Those were his opening words. And he spent 20 minutes telling me the and more within the limit of his oath. I guess it went as far as he could. And he said, and this was the most important thing he said during that period, was that there have been face-to-face meetings between United States officials and visitors from other star systems, period. No equivocation. They have a deal that they won't interfere. But I think that there's also a loophole if things get bad enough that they would make exceptions. But we can't count on them. I mean, maybe we can count on them, but we shouldn't count on them because they say, you clean up your act. You're in charge, it's your planet, and if it comes to a dead end, it will be because you let it or made it a dead end.
Grush has written an internal document about his discoveries that refers to agreements that risk putting our future in jeopardy. And it's quite clear that you're talking about agreements between America and non-human intelligences. Have we made agreements with non-human intelligences?
That's the kind of information I really hope national leadership is able to get to the bottom of.
I need to pin you down on this. Are there agreements between non-human intelligences and the American government?
I think that's a question that I would like to know all the details of as well.
For myself, I think it's the right time and place. I remember I was at NASA and I was having a meeting with one of the top people there, one of the top 5 people there. And I made everyone leave the office, and I said, hey, I just want to let you know what I'm getting ready to do. And I laid out the entire plan. And this person looked at me, took a deep breath, and said, this is a very, very good time for this, or it's a very, very good time for this. And I remember that, just staring at this person going, okay, so something's already in the works, it seemed like to me,
Rapidly moving to a place where it's not about proving they're real. It's about understanding them and trying to analyze what it's going to mean for the future that we're all about to live in. And I have to say, candidly, in this last month, honestly, folks, I've had more than a few moments where I literally just have to sit down in my quiet house and start to contemplate what's really happening here, and what does it mean to me? What does it mean to you? What about my family? You know, I have children. What's their world going to look like? Is this world going to be a better one or a worse one? And frankly, is there anything that any of us can do to impact that? I just have so many questions swirling around.
Well, I think a lot of people are at this point. Something shifted. And I really think it was, in my personal opinion, and I may be wrong, but I think a lot of the people that were initially involved in this project, discovery and research, are all dying now. And they did a really poor job of transition. Do you know what I mean? Like bringing in the new people and keeping the same level of secrecy. Right. I think they lost it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, maybe in 4 years, this will all make sense. But I mean, it really depends because, when you do the deep dive on something, nobody really gets it until they do also that same deep dive.
How?
Till later.
Now, when I said earlier that the time is right, let me go into that a little bit more. Many years ago, when I was in more direct verbal contact, I would say, with the visitors, in other words, they were communicating with me, not physically, but very close to it. They gave me a number of pieces of information, among which was that they would not emerge unless they had to. And I got the impression that they wouldn't be happy about doing that. In other words, it's going to look like all sweetness and light at first, but then maybe not. Right. Because maybe they're going to impose things on us that we are not expecting to be imposed on us by someone from the outside. We're going to be made offers we can't refuse.
See, that's a very good question. Like, I understand exactly what he's asking, but I just want to clarify. Like, here's the thing: the lady never gave a date. The lady, all she gave was the alignment, the red star aligning with the gaze of the Sphinx in a constellation Leo just before dawn. Right now, some other researchers have said it's September 2026. Initially, that's what they said, and then some other researchers said no, it's actually March 2026. Do I know that anything is going to happen in 2026? No. Will the alignment happen? I personally don't know. I mean, this researcher said it, this researcher said it. I'm confused at this point. I think that really the only thing you can do is just hang on to hope and just realize, like, these beings are real. Many people around the world are seeing them, not just my dad and me and my family. Yes, we've seen them. Yes, we've seen them in a very extreme way, but we're not the only ones who see them. They're very real. Go on the internet, look up orb videos, look up UFO videos. Yeah. They're real. Yeah. That's really all I have to go on. It's just hope that what they're saying is true. And you just got to find that in yourself to figure that part out, unfortunately.
But the lady I met in 2012, she told me, she said there's going to be an alignment. And she said there'll be a new knowledge to come to the human race. And that new knowledge will happen when the red star of Regulus appears on the horizon in front of the Sphinx, in the gaze, just before dawn. I had no clue what that meant at all. I called a friend of mine who's a literary agent, Lisa Hagen, and Lisa has a whole group of astrologers that she works with, different folks. and they ran a star chart, and she called me up. Wow, you're not going to believe this. That does happen in 2026. And so what that new knowledge is going to be, I don't know, but I tend to believe it's going to be disclosure, that it's going to be an awakening into.
Thanks, Ross. There's been a couple of questions that go to the timeline of all of this. So December 2017, the New York Times article, Lua Elizondo mentioned something that, if you don't have a hobby, get one for 5 years, and then when you come back, all of this will be out. You've got outspoken figures like John Ramirez saying 2027 rings a bell. Tom DeLonge has been talking about it. Then you've got Diana Pasolka and Jacques Vallée saying something along the lines of, the more you become aware of the phenomenon, the more the phenomenon becomes aware of you. This is in the Passport to Magnolia and also the American Cosmic book. So are you aware of any specific timeline?
There are people who've talked to me about timelines, impending catastrophes, apocalypses, geological upheavals, wars, but they all contradict each other. I've never received determinative corroborative evidence, which is what somebody like me looks for to make a determinative conclusion. I've heard a multitude of dates between 2026 and 2036. I don't know if any of it's true.
Now, another thing that I think we know, some people know, within the government, I don't know for a fact, but I think they know that there's something going to happen in 2027. Mm-hmm. Now, there's this rumor, this guy, he's thinking that something Voyager 1 and 2 and now just recently New Horizon saw with their cameras that's heading towards Earth that's worrying a lot of people. I think that's a second thing that the government knows about. I don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's some asteroid or a whole alien invasion fleet, or I don't know what it is, but that just fascinates me.